I never imagined my sister, Sarah's wheelchair, would become a symbol of defiance, chained to our front porch by our power-mad Homeowners Association president. It was a blatant act of cruelty, and it all came to a head when an undercover FBI agent revealed that our seemingly quiet neighborhood, Willow Creek Estates, had been under surveillance for years. How far would you go when your family's freedom is literally locked away by the very people sworn to protect your community? Comment below with where you're watching from. The sound of metal grinding against concrete jolted me awake at 5:30 a.m. My heart pounded in my chest. Still in my pajamas, I raced to the front door, my bare feet slapping against the cold tile. What I saw made my stomach churn. Two men, sporting Willow Creek Estates HOA polo shirts, were wrapping a thick, industrial-grade chain around Sarah's wheelchair, securing it to our porch railing with a massive padlock. "Hey, what are you doing?" I yelled, rushing outside, my voice cracking with disbelief. "That's my sister's wheelchair." The taller man, his face devoid of emotion, handed me a piece of paper. "Mobility devices must be stored out of sight per HOA Bylaw 23.4. This is your third warning." Third warning? We'd never received a single notice. My mind reeled. Sarah had only moved in with me 3 months ago, after a horrific car accident had left her paralyzed from the waist down. "We never got any warnings," I protested, my voice rising in panic. "Ma'am, please take it up with the board," the second man said, curtly, his tone dismissive. They hurried to their golf cart, the electric motor whining as they sped away, leaving me standing there, barefoot and trembling with rage. I tugged at the chain, desperate to free the wheelchair, but it was useless. It was industrial-grade, unyielding. Sarah appeared in the doorway behind me, leaning heavily on her crutches she hadn't touched in weeks, thanks to the independence her wheelchair provided. "Rachel, what's happening?" Her voice shook, her eyes wide with fear. Sarah had worked tirelessly in physical therapy, pushing herself to regain her independence. Seeing her so vulnerable, so defeated, ignited a fire in my soul. "It's some kind of mistake," I said, forcing a calmness I didn't feel. "I'll get this fixed, I promise." I frantically called a locksmith, but the earliest he could come was the afternoon. Panic clawed at my throat. Sarah had a job interview that day, a crucial step in rebuilding her life. "I have my interview today," she said, tears streaming down her face. "I can't miss it." I helped Sarah into my car, my hands shaking, and drove her to the interview. But the damage was done. Her confidence was shattered, the hard-won independence stripped away. While she was at the interview, I obsessively read through all 94 pages of our HOA guidelines. There it was, Bylaw 23.4, stating that mobility equipment must be stored inside or in designated areas. But the rule was clearly intended for things like bicycles and scooters, not essential medical equipment. This was a deliberate misinterpretation, a targeted attack. The locksmith finally arrived, charging me a staggering $175 for the emergency service. As he worked, my next-door neighbor, Diane, walked by, her 3 unauthorized garden gnomes somehow escaping the HOA's scrutiny. "Such a shame what Barbara's doing to you folks," Diane whispered, her voice laced with sympathy. Barbara Thompson, the HOA president?" I asked. Diane nodded grimly. "She doesn't like changes to the neighborhood aesthetic. The Millers had to move after their son got a service dog." That evening, I emailed the HOA board, explaining Sarah's disability and formally requesting an accommodation under the Americans with Disabilities Act, ADA. The response was swift and brutal. "Your request for exemption is denied. Additionally, the unauthorized wheelchair ramp at your front entrance Must be removed within 48 hours. Stunned, I stared at the email. The ramp? It had been approved by the city. I had permits. The next day, I called the city planning office, confirming my permits were in order. But when I returned home, a $500 fine was taped to my door, citing unauthorized modifications. I spotted Barbara Thompson herself, standing on the sidewalk, snapping pictures of our house. She was in her early 60s, perfectly coiffed blonde hair, sporting an expensive-looking tennis outfit, despite never, to my knowledge, using the community courts. "Barbara," I approached her, trying to maintain a semblance of calm. "Can we talk about this? My sister Sarah has a disability and—" "Rules are rules," she cut me off, her voice like ice. "Your sister's condition doesn't entitle you to decrease property values for everyone else." "The wheelchair ramp is barely visible from the street," I explained, my voice trembling with suppressed anger. "And chaining down a wheelchair is not only cruel, but probably illegal." Barbara's eyes narrowed. "Perhaps Willow Creek isn't the right community for your family's needs." As she turned to leave, I noticed she completely ignored the Petersons' holiday inflatables, still up from last Christmas, and Mr. Rivera's boat parked conspicuously in his driveway, both blatant HOA violations. That night, I stayed up late, researching disability laws. The HOA's actions were a clear violation of federal protections. I printed out the relevant statutes, determined to fight back. The next evening, I walked into the community center for the HOA meeting. The room fell silent. 20 pairs of eyes stared at me as I took a seat in the back. Barbara, of course, presided at the front table, flanked by 4 other board members. I raised my hand during the open comments section, but Barbara pointedly ignored me, time and again. Finally, I stood up. "I'd like to address the board about disability accommodations and the illegal chaining of medical equipment," I said, my voice loud and clear. Barbara's face flushed crimson. "That's not on tonight's agenda. Sit down, or you'll be removed." Surprisingly, my neighbor Kevin stood up. "I want to hear what Rachel has to say. My mother uses a wheelchair too." Reluctantly, Barbara granted me 3 minutes. I calmly explained Sarah's situation, distributing copies of the ADA requirements. Some neighbors nodded in agreement. "Furthermore," I concluded, "I've documented selective enforcement of HOA rules throughout our community with photographic evidence." I held up a folder brimming with pictures, showcasing numerous violations that went unpunished at specific homes. Barbara slammed her gavel. "Meeting adjourned." As people filed out, Kevin approached me. "Be careful," he whispered, his eyes darting around nervously. "Barbara has friends on the city council, but you're not alone in this fight." I drove home, a knot of anxiety tightening in my stomach, but also a flicker of determination. When I pulled into my driveway, my heart stopped. Yellow eviction notices were plastered all over my front door. They weren't even legal. They were fake HOA documents designed to intimidate. I tore them down before Sarah could see them, my hands shaking with fury. The next morning, the sound of drilling woke me. I ran outside to find 2 men installing a security camera on the light post directly across from my house. "What's going on?" I demanded. "HOA security upgrades," the installer replied, not even bothering to look at me. "All common areas are getting cameras." Except this camera wasn't pointed at any common area. It was aimed directly at my front door. This was blatant harassment. I called my friend Mia, a real estate lawyer. "They can't do this," she confirmed, her voice sharp with anger. "Document everything. Get a camera of your own." I installed a doorbell camera that afternoon. Within an hour, Barbara Thompson herself marched up to my porch and slipped another notice into my mailbox. My camera caught her smirking at my door. The notice was for another fine, $750 for making false accusations against the board. At the bottom, a handwritten note. Payment plans available if needed. We understand disabilities can be financially straining. That was the final straw. I created a private neighborhood Facebook group called Willow Creek Transparency and invited everyone except board members. By evening, 50 neighbors had joined. I shared my documentation of selective rule enforcement, complete with time-stamped photos. The comments poured in, a torrent of outrage and shared grievances. They fined me $300 for my daughter's basketball hoop, but ignored the identical one at the treasurer's house. Barbara's son parks his commercial truck at her house every weekend against HOA rules. They denied my request for a solar panel, but approved one for Barbara's friend. The next morning, someone slipped a large envelope under my door. Inside were financial documents showing that the HOA had paid $45,000 to a landscaping company owned by Barbara's brother for work that was never completed. A handwritten note was included. I'm on the budget committee. There's more. Be careful who you trust. I made copies and locked the originals in my safe. When Sarah left for physical therapy, I drove to the county records office. The property maps clearly showed that my wheelchair ramp was built entirely within my property line, not on common areas, as the HOA claimed. That afternoon, 3 board members, including Barbara, knocked on my door. We've come to offer a compromise, Barbara said, a tight smile plastered on her face. We'll allow temporary use of the wheelchair, provided it's covered with an approved neutral-colored tarp when outside. I remained calm. That's not a reasonable accommodation under federal law. Also, I'd like to discuss these financial records showing HOA funds paid to your brother's company. Barbara's face went pale. The other board members exchanged nervous glances. You're making a big mistake, Barbara hissed. I've been running this community for 15 years. People who challenge me don't last long here. After they left, I noticed a white van parked across the street. The same van was there the next day and the day after. Sarah was becoming increasingly anxious. Maybe we should just move, Rachel, she said, her voice filled with despair. I don't want to cause trouble. This isn't about trouble, I told her fiercely. This is about standing up to bullies. We have every right to be here. I contacted the local news station, Channel 7, and showed them my evidence of discrimination and potential financial misconduct. They were interested, but they needed more sources. Through the Facebook group, I connected with the Millers, who had moved away after the service dog issue. They agreed to be interviewed. 3 other former residents came forward with similar stories. The reporter discovered that Barbara Thompson had been sued twice before for HOA discrimination in other communities. The cases had been settled quietly, with non-disclosure agreements. I was preparing dinner when Kevin knocked on my back door. Don't react to what I'm about to tell you, he said quietly. I'm not just your neighbor. I'm with the FBI's white-collar crime division. We've been investigating Barbara and this HOA for months. My jaw dropped. What? Financial fraud? Across multiple HOAs, yes. But now we're adding civil rights violations, he said, handing me his card. We need your help to build our case. Can we count on you? Before I could answer, we heard glass shattering at the front of the house. We ran to find a brick had been thrown through Sarah's bedroom window. Attached was a note. Leave or worse. Kevin immediately called it in. This changes things, he said grimly. Now we've got criminal intimidation. As police officers took statements and collected evidence, Barbara drove by slowly in her luxury SUV, watching. Our eyes met, and she gave me a cold, chilling smile before driving away. I turned to Kevin. What exactly do you need me to do? Someone was knocking insistently on my door at 9:30 p.m. I peered cautiously through the blinds, my heart pounding in my chest to see my neighbor, Kevin, standing on my porch, his head on a swivel, constantly looking over his shoulder. The moment I cracked the door open, he pushed past me, his face etched with worry, without waiting for an invitation. "We need to talk about Barbara and what she did to your sister's wheelchair," he whispered, his eyes wide with a mixture of urgency and fear, "but not where anyone can overhear us." My stomach dropped. A wave of nausea washed over me. Did you help her do that to Sarah's chair?" I asked, my voice barely a whisper, ready to shove him back out the door. Kevin shook his head vehemently. No, the opposite. I've been watching Barbara for months." He pulled out a worn leather wallet and flipped it open, revealing a gleaming FBI badge. "I'm not really a retired accountant. I'm an undercover agent." I nearly collapsed into the nearest chair. "FBI for an HOA dispute? This is insane." "This goes way beyond wheelchair ramps and lawn ornaments, Rachel," Kevin said, lowering his voice even further. "Barbara Thompson has been running this scam in 3 different neighborhoods over the past 15 years. Kevin explained that after receiving dozens of complaints about discrimination, the FBI had launched an investigation into Barbara 6 months prior. She would infiltrate HOAs, systematically change the rules, and then use her power to force out families she deemed undesirable, families like mine and Sarah's. "But she also skims money off the top," Kevin continued, his voice tight with anger. "Those special assessments for the community pool repairs last year? Half that money went straight into her personal account. I remembered writing that $800 check, barely able to afford it, a sickening feeling churning in my gut. Are you serious? And nobody noticed? She replaces board members with her cronies. Anyone who questions her gets targeted with violations, harassed until they move away." Kevin pulled out his phone and showed me photos. Barbara, meeting with contractors behind the clubhouse, hushed conversations, furtive glances. She gets kickbacks from every vendor she forces the HOA to hire. "So all those contractor vans at her house," I started, piecing it together, "aren't just for her kitchen remodel. They're paying her to get exclusive HOA contracts," Kevin finished, his jaw clenched. My mind raced, replaying all the changes since Barbara became president 2 years ago. The landscaping company that inexplicably doubled our fees, the new unwanted security system, the special assessment for roof repairs that mysteriously only seemed to happen on her street. But then a question that burned in my mind surfaced. "But why chain my sister's wheelchair?" I asked, the image still vivid and painful. "That seems personal." Kevin's expression darkened. "Barbara targets anyone she perceives as lowering property values. She's been recorded using appalling language about people with disabilities. We have emails where she explicitly told the board, 'Your sister makes the neighborhood look like a hospital zone.'" My blood boiled. A wave of righteous fury washed over me. "That's disgusting. It's inhumane. It's also illegal," Kevin stated firmly. "The wheelchair incident provides us with concrete evidence of ADA violations, but we need more to build a comprehensive case regarding the financial crimes." He slid a small, sleek device across my table. "This is a specialized voice recorder. We need you to get her to admit to the wheelchair incident, and ideally, to talk about the HOA finances." I stared at the device, my palms sweating. "You want me to spy on her? You'd be helping us build a case that could help dozens of families she's victimized," Kevin explained, his voice earnest. "But I won't lie, it's not without risk. Barbara has friends in the local police department too." Just then, headlights swept across my living room window, illuminating the room for a split second. Kevin instantly ducked down, peering cautiously through the blinds. "That's her car," he whispered, his voice barely audible. "Third time today, she's driven by your house." We watched in tense silence, as Barbara's luxury SUV crawled past, slowing dramatically in front of my home, the brake lights flaring red. Kevin waited until she had turned the corner before straightening up. "She's watching you," he warned, his voice grave. "Be extremely careful what you say and to whom. Some of the neighbors are informants. They report directly back to her." As Kevin prepared to leave, he paused at the door, his hand on the knob. "Think about it. If you want to help, text the word pool to the number I just put in your phone. If not, I understand." After he left, I sat in the darkened living room for a long time, the silence heavy and oppressive. From down the hall, I could hear Sarah struggling to transfer from her wheelchair to her bed, her movements strained, her grunts of effort piercing the quiet. Too proud to call out for help, the sounds of her quiet frustration solidified my decision. I picked up my phone and typed the single word, pool. Within seconds, a response came back. "Meeting tomorrow, playground, 3:00 p.m. I went to check on Sarah, but as I approached her room, I noticed something out of place outside her window. A small, flickering red light blinking intermittently in the bushes across the street. Someone was watching our house. The next day, I spotted Kevin sitting alone on a bench at the community playground, pretending to read a newspaper like a scene straight out of an old spy movie. As I approached, a mum with 2 young children walked past, and Kevin immediately and seamlessly transitioned into a loud, boisterous discussion about baseball scores. Once they were out of earshot, he handed me a seemingly innocuous coffee cup. "The recorder is inside," he whispered, his voice low and urgent. "Just press the bottom of the cup once to activate it." As we discussed the plan, I noticed the Henderson kids playing nearby. Their mother, Judy Henderson, was a prominent member of the HOA board and one of Barbara's closest confidants. "Don't look now," I murmured, "but we're being watched." Kevin nodded subtly, his eyes scanning the area. "That's why we're only talking about baseball. As far as anyone knows, we barely know each other." He explained that the FBI had uncovered evidence that Barbara was using HOA funds to pay for her daughter's college tuition and her husband's extravagant golf membership. They needed irrefutable evidence directly connecting her to these financial decisions, as well as the orchestrated harassment campaign against homeowners who dared to oppose her. "The meeting tonight is perfect," Kevin said, referring to the emergency HOA session Barbara had hastily called. "We know she's planning to announce another special assessment, supposedly for security camera upgrades, but the majority of that money will simply disappear." I frowned, my brow furrowing in confusion. How am I supposed to get her to admit to anything with the entire board present? "You're not," Kevin replied, a hint of a smile playing on his lips. "You're going to publicly challenge her about Sarah's wheelchair. She'll get angry, flustered, and afterward, she'll almost certainly confront you privately. That's when you record her." As we finished talking, I saw Judy Henderson staring directly at us while feigning interest in her children's play. She immediately pulled out her phone and started texting furiously. "She's reporting to Barbara right now," Kevin said quietly, his voice devoid of emotion. "Remember, as far as you know, I'm just a friendly neighbor." That evening, I arrived at the clubhouse for the HOA meeting, armed with the recording coffee cup and a folder overflowing with printouts detailing ADA regulations. Every seat was occupied, with many neighbors forced to stand along the walls, the largest turnout I'd ever seen. Barbara, predictably, sat at the front table, flanked by her 4 loyal board members, her usual fake smile firmly in place. "Before we get to the new security assessment," I called out, interrupting Barbara before she could even begin, "I'd like to address the illegal chaining of my disabled sister's wheelchair." The room fell deathly silent. Barbara's smile vanished, replaced by a look of cold fury. "That matter was handled according to HOA bylaws," she said icily. "Your personal grievances are not on tonight's agenda." I held up the heavy, rusted chain that had been cruelly fastened to Sarah's wheelchair. "This is discrimination against a person with disabilities. It violates federal law." Several neighbors gasped audibly. Barbara's face turned a shade of red I'd never seen before. "Your sister's equipment was improperly stored," Barbara snapped, her voice trembling with barely suppressed rage. "The board's decisions are final." "We never voted on restraining a wheelchair," said Jack Wilson, a board member I barely knew, his voice surprisingly firm. "When did we approve that?" Barbara glared at Jack, her eyes blazing. "We discussed this in private, Jack, like we discussed the $50,000 for the clubhouse renovation that never happened," I interjected loudly, my voice echoing through the stunned silence. The room erupted in a cacophony of confused questions and murmurs. Many neighbors looked shocked. They clearly hadn't known about the missing renovation funds. "This meeting is about security cameras, not your baseless accusations," Barbara shouted, banging her gavel repeatedly, her face now a mask of fury. "Security that we clearly need, with troublemakers like you in our community." As the meeting dissolved into chaos, I noticed Kevin at the back of the room, discreetly typing something on his phone. Our plan was working. Barbara was rapidly losing control. After Barbara abruptly ended the meeting, I lingered in the parking lot, pretending to search for my keys. Sure enough, Barbara stormed over to my car, her heels clicking angrily on the pavement. "You've made a serious mistake," she hissed, jabbing her finger at my chest, her voice dripping with venom. "Your little stunt tonight will cost you." I pressed the bottom of my coffee cup, activating the recorder. Are you threatening me, Barbara?" "I'm promising you consequences," she spat. "Your sister's wheelchair was just the beginning. Keep pushing, and you'll find your car towed, your trees cut down for safety violations, and fines you can't possibly pay." "Why are you doing this?" I asked, trying to keep her talking, my voice trembling with a mixture of anger and fear. "What did we ever do to you?" Barbara stepped closer, her face inches from mine. "People like your sister bring down property values. I've worked too hard, building this community, to let people like you ruin it. The same way I got rid of the Gonzalez family and their noisy kids, and old Mrs. Wilkins with her ugly medical equipment on the porch." My hands shook with rage, but I kept the recorder running. "And the money? For the clubhouse renovation? The new security system?" She gave a small, smug smile. "Managing an HOA isn't free. Consider it my compensation for keeping undesirables out." As she turned to walk away, she paused, turning back to me, a chilling glint in her eyes. "I'd start packing if I were you. By this time next month, you won't be able to afford to live here anymore." I waited until she drove away before texting Kevin. "Got it all." His reply came seconds later. "Don't go home yet, wait 30 minutes." I sat in my car, bewildered, wondering what he meant. Then I saw Barbara's SUV return to the clubhouse. She went inside with 2 board members carrying folders. Through the window, I could see them frantically removing papers from the filing cabinets, stuffing them into large bags. They were destroying evidence. I snapped photos with my phone, then ducked down as they returned to the parking lot. Once they left, I drove home the long way, making sure I wasn't followed. When I finally arrived, I found Sarah waiting up for me, her face etched with worry. "How did it go?" she asked anxiously. Before I could answer, we heard a loud thwack against our garage door. I rushed to the window, just in time to see Barbara's teenage son sprinting away. After spray painting "Leave Now" in large, angry letters across our garage. "It went exactly as planned," I said grimly, sending the photos and a message to Kevin. "They're scared." Sarah wheeled over and squeezed my hand, her grip surprisingly strong. "What happens tomorrow?" "Tomorrow," I said, a steely determination hardening my voice, "we spring the trap." As we turned off the lights, I noticed a car slowly parking across the street, its headlights extinguished. Someone was watching our house. "Don't look," I whispered to Sarah. "But I think the FBI isn't the only one conducting surveillance tonight." Barbara's face turned ashen, whiter than a ghost, when she saw Kevin holding up his FBI badge, the gold glinting in the early morning sun. I'll never forget the look in her eyes, like a child caught red-handed stealing cookies, but magnified 1,000 times, the realization of impending doom washing over her. "Barbara Thompson," Kevin announced loudly, his voice resonating across the street, ensuring everyone within earshot could hear, "The FBI has been watching you and your HOA board for the past 8 months. People started emerging from their houses, drawn by the commotion. The Jacksons across the street, the elderly Fosters from next door, even the Petersons, paused their meticulous watering of their illegal garden gnomes to stare, their eyes wide with disbelief. This isn't what it looks like," Barbara stammered, her voice shaking, her carefully constructed composure crumbling before our eyes. She dropped her clipboard, the papers scattering across the neatly manicured lawn. "I'm just enforcing the rules." Everyone agreed to. Kevin shook his head, his expression unwavering. "Rules you changed without proper votes. Rules you only applied selectively to certain people. Rules that most significantly break federal disability laws." More FBI agents arrived in unmarked cars, their presence adding to the growing sense of gravity. One of the agents handed me back the chain they'd found in Barbara's garage, the very one used to cruelly imprison Sarah's wheelchair. They had irrefutable fingerprint evidence linking it directly to Barbara and her most loyal accomplice, board member Tom Wilson. "We have video evidence of you placing this chain," the agent told Barbara, his voice devoid of emotion. Her perfectly styled hair, usually so impeccably coiffed, seemed to deflate, mirroring her collapsing facade. Sarah rolled onto the porch, her movements strong and confident. "I've never been prouder of my sister. I thought I was the one with mobility issues," she said to Barbara, her voice clear and strong, ringing with defiance. "But you're the one who can't seem to move forward with the times." The news van from Channel 7 pulled up, its arrival perfectly timed. I'd called them the night before, after Kevin had given me the green light. Their reporter, Sandra Lee, rushed over, her cameraman in tow, microphone extended towards Barbara, who instinctively tried to shield her face. "Is it true the Willow Creek HOA has been targeting disabled residents?" Sandra asked, her voice sharp and probing. "No comment," Barbara shouted, attempting to push past the agents, her carefully cultivated image shattering into a million pieces. Kevin stepped forward, addressing the growing crowd of neighbors, his voice carrying authority and conviction. "We have substantial evidence that Mrs. Thompson and her board have embezzled over $350,000 from homeowner fees over the past 3 years. A collective gasp swept through the crowd. The Andersons, whose children's treehouse had been forcibly taken down last summer, were recording everything on their phones, their faces alight with a mixture of shock and vindication. "That money was supposed to fix the community pool," shouted Mr. Foster, who himself used a walker, his voice trembling with outrage. "You said there wasn't enough in the budget." Barbara tried to make a dash for her car, but another agent swiftly blocked her path. "We have a warrant to search your home and the HOA office," he said, holding up the official documents, the paper crinkling in the sudden silence. I noticed Tom Wilson and 2 other board members attempting to discreetly slip away through backyards, their faces pale with panic. "Kevin," I pointed, my voice urgent. "The rest of her team is escaping." Agents quickly apprehended them, while others began systematically searching Barbara's house. Within minutes, they emerged carrying boxes, overflowing with documents, hard drives, and, most shockingly of all, a heavy safe containing stacks of cash and expensive jewelry, all purchased with our hard-earned money. "We found falsified ballots from the last 3 HOA elections," announced a female agent, her voice ringing with authority. "Barbara has been rigging votes to keep herself in power." The Petersons, who had always been staunch supporters of Barbara, looked utterly stunned, their faces a mixture of disbelief and betrayal. "She told us our Christmas decorations were approved because they added character to the neighborhood," Mrs. Peterson admitted, her voice shaking. "But she fined the Martinez family for their holiday lights." Kevin addressed the growing crowd, his voice calm but firm. "We believe Mrs. Thompson has been systematically targeting homeowners who challenged her authority or who she simply, personally disliked. She's been using selective enforcement as a weapon." My phone buzzed incessantly with text messages from neighbors I barely knew, all expressing shock, support, and a shared sense of relief. The community I thought had turned against Sarah and me was, in reality, filled with people who had been bullied into silence, afraid to speak out. An emergency community meeting was called that very evening at the clubhouse. Almost every resident from Willow Creek's 200 homes attended, the largest turnout in neighborhood history. People shared story after story of Barbara's tyranny, their voices trembling with years of pent-up frustration and anger. "She fined me for my daughter's basketball hoop, but ignored the Wilsons' identical one," said Mrs. Garcia, her voice rising with indignation. "She denied my request for a security light after my house was broken into, but approved her friend's backyard spotlight that shines directly into my bedroom," added Mr. Patel, his face flushed with anger. The FBI presented irrefutable evidence, detailing how Barbara had created a fake landscaping company that charged the HOA double the normal rates, with half the money funneled directly into her personal account. They showed bank records detailing her lavish vacation home in Florida, her luxury car, all paid for with our money. "How did you catch her?" someone in the crowd asked, their voice filled with awe. "It started with a wheelchair chain," I explained, holding up the heavy, rusted links, the metal cold against my skin. "She went too far when she targeted someone who couldn't defend themselves. But Sarah and I decided to fight back, with evidence, not anger." The crowd erupted in applause. I wasn't accustomed to being the center of attention, but it felt incredibly empowering to stand up, not just for Sarah, but for everyone who had been silenced and victimized. By a resounding majority vote, a temporary board was established that night. To my surprise, they asked me to join. "We need someone who stands up for what's right," said Mrs. Foster, her voice filled with sincerity. 1 week later, Barbara Thompson, Tom Wilson, and 2 other board members were formally charged with multiple federal crimes: fraud, embezzlement, civil rights violations, and conspiracy. They faced years in prison and hefty fines. The HOA bank accounts were frozen, while forensic accountants meticulously traced every missing dollar. The new board discovered that Barbara had been skimming money for nearly 5 years, almost from the very day she became president. Our first official act as the new board was to pass a comprehensive accessibility policy, with Sarah serving as the lead consultant. All outstanding violation notices were immediately suspended, while we rewrote the bylaws to be fair, equitable, and transparent. "This isn't about getting revenge," I told the newspaper reporter who covered our story, her pen scribbling furiously in her notebook. "It's about making sure everybody feels welcome in their own neighborhood." 2 months later, the community gathered for a joyous block party, the first in Willow Creek's history. People who had lived next door to each other for years, but had been kept apart by fear and intimidation, were finally becoming friends. Children played freely on lawns without the constant threat of arbitrary violation notices. The Martinez family's son, who, like Sarah, used a walker, enthusiastically demonstrated the new accessible playground equipment we'd installed with the recovered funds. As Sarah and I watched our neighbors laughing, sharing food, and connecting with one another, she squeezed my hand, her eyes sparkling with happiness. "Thank you for not giving up," she said, her voice thick with emotion. "Some chains you can see," I replied, my voice catching in my throat. "And some you can't. We broke both kinds." The infamous wheelchair chain now hangs prominently in our community center, a powerful symbol of our collective struggle and triumph. A small plaque beneath it reads, "Freedom sometimes requires courage, community, and occasionally the FBI." Barbara's house stands empty, awaiting sale, a stark reminder of the past. Sometimes I catch neighbors glancing at it as they walk by, still processing how one person could wield so much control over their lives. But mostly, people are looking forward, not back. Yesterday, Sarah rolled smoothly and effortlessly up the gentle slope of our new community-wide accessible pathways, racing the neighborhood kids on their bikes. No chains, no barriers, no fear. She smiled at me, a radiant, genuine smile, and said something I'll never forget. "The best revenge isn't getting even. It's getting better." This story highlights the importance of standing up for what's right, even when facing seemingly insurmountable odds. It demonstrates that one person's courage, combined with community support and a commitment to justice, can overcome even the most entrenched systems of power and abuse. It also serves as a powerful reminder that true community is built on inclusivity, respect, and a willingness to fight for the rights of all its members. Have you ever experienced a similar situation in your community? Share your stories and thoughts in the comments below. And don't forget to subscribe to our channel for more inspiring stories of courage and resilience. The gravel crunched under the tires of Karen Thompson's gleaming black SUV as it pulled into our driveway, and my stomach instantly twisted into a knot. Every time the HOA president visited, trouble inevitably followed. "Michael?" Karen called through her barely lowered window, her voice dripping with a saccharine sweetness that didn't fool me for a second. "Those garden gnomes, they simply must go. They're in direct violation of Section 8, Paragraph 12 of our community guidelines." I slowly set down the watering can, my hands starting to tremble slightly. "They've been here for 7 years, Karen, ever since Dad passed." Karen's smile remained fixed, but it didn't reach her eyes, which were as cold and hard as flint. "Rules are rules, Michael. I've been lenient, but the board is insisting. Remove them by Friday, or it's a $200 fine per gnome." As her SUV reversed, kicking up more dust, I counted the garden gnomes, my heart sinking with each one. All 8 of them. Each one represented a cherished memory with Dad, a small token of happier times. That would be $1,600 in fines if I ignored her. Money we absolutely didn't have, not with Mum's medical bills relentlessly piling up. Mum appeared at the screen door, leaning heavily against the frame for support, her face pale and drawn. "Was that Karen again?" she asked, her voice weaker than usual. "Just HOA business," I lied, forcing a smile I didn't feel, not wanting to add to her worries. Mum had been experiencing dizzy spells lately, a terrifying new development, and the doctors were baffled as to the cause. By that night, I had carefully wrapped each gnome in newspaper, a lump forming in my throat with each one, and stored them in the garage. Dad had bought one every year on Mum's birthday, a tradition he'd cherished. Now, they sat in darkness, like pieces of our happiness were being slowly, methodically chipped away. The feeling of helplessness was suffocating. Friday arrived, and like clockwork, I spotted Karen making her rounds through the neighborhood, clipboard in hand, meticulously checking for violations. She paused at our garden, making a theatrical show of nodding in approval before writing something down. Something about that gesture felt deeply unsettling. By Monday, the situation escalated. We received another notice. Our mailbox was the wrong shade of blue. We were required to repaint it the approved midnight azure from the HOA color palette. "It's just a mailbox," I told Mum, trying to sound nonchalant as I repainted it, "not worth fighting over." But a gnawing unease had begun to settle in my gut. However, the minor infractions continued, piling up with alarming speed. The next week, it was our bird feeder, then our wind chimes, then the height of our hedges. Each time Karen visited, Mum seemed noticeably worse afterward. More tired, more confused, her skin taking on a slightly jaundiced hue. I started to wonder, with a growing sense of dread, if the constant stress was exacerbating her mysterious condition. One evening, as I was taking out the trash, I noticed Doug Thompson, Karen's husband, standing near our water meter at the very edge of our property. The instant he saw me, he quickly walked away, pretending to check his phone. "Everything okay?" I called out, my voice laced with suspicion. "Just walking the dog," he replied, though I didn't see any dog anywhere near him. I immediately mentioned it to our neighbor, Elaine Rodriguez, who lived directly across the street. "The Thompsons don't even have a dog," she whispered conspiratorially, leaning over her fence. "And between you and me, Karen's been targeting anyone who voted against her at the last HOA election. Your mum was the only one who spoke up about Karen's outrageous plan to double our dues." That night, Mum couldn't keep her dinner down. Her skin looked disturbingly yellow in the harsh bathroom light as she hunched over the toilet, her body racked with tremors. "I think we should go to the hospital," I said, my voice tight with fear, helping her to the car. The emergency room doctor ran a battery of tests, but found nothing conclusive. "Could be a virus," he suggested vaguely, "or possibly something environmental. Any changes at home recently?" On the drive back, Mum dozed fitfully in the passenger seat. I deliberately took the long way, passing the Thompson house. Their lights were on, and I could see Karen and Doug in their kitchen window, laughing over glasses of wine. The sight of their carefree joy fueled a burning anger within me. The next morning, Mum couldn't even get out of bed. Her hands shook so violently she couldn't hold her coffee mug. I called Dr. Patel, who, thankfully, agreed to squeeze her in. While waiting for our appointment, I decided to meticulously walk our property line, searching for anything unusual, anything out of place, particularly near the water meter where I'd seen Doug. The ground near the meter looked disturbed. Kneeling down, I noticed something horrifying: small droplets of a viscous blue liquid on some nearby rocks. At that very moment, my phone rang. It was the hospital. Mom had collapsed in Dr. Patel's office, the nurse explained, her voice urgent. "We're running toxicology screens. The doctor suspects some type of poisoning." Poisoning. My mind instantly flashed to Doug by our water meter, the strange blue drops, the precise timing of Mom's symptoms worsening after Karen's visits. A cold, hard fury began to solidify in my chest. I rushed to the hardware store and bought a high-definition security camera. That night, I installed the camera in our old oak tree, pointing it directly at the water meter. If Doug came back, I'd have undeniable proof. Mum stayed in the hospital for 3 agonizing days. Her tests showed elevated levels of strange chemicals, but nothing the doctors could immediately identify. Whatever it is, it's causing significant liver and kidney stress, Dr. Patel explained gravely. Has she been exposed to any chemicals, pesticides, new cleaning products? When we finally got home, a bright orange notice was taped to our door. The HOA was fining us for unauthorized landscaping because I hadn't mowed the lawn while taking care of Mum in the hospital. As I crumpled the notice in my fist, my security camera alert pinged. Someone was at our water meter right now. I raced outside, adrenaline coursing through my veins, just in time to see Doug Thompson hurrying away. Karen waited in their SUV at the curb, the engine running, a smug look on her face. "What are you doing to our water?" I shouted, my voice raw with rage. Karen rolled down her window, her expression a mask of feigned innocence. "Michael, you're clearly under a lot of stress. Perhaps your mother's illness is affecting your judgment." They drove off before I could respond, leaving me shaking with fury and frustration. My hands trembled as I checked the security footage. There it was, clear as day. Doug pouring something from a small, unlabeled bottle into our water line. Karen keeping watch, both of them smiling. It was sickening. I grabbed a water sample from our kitchen tap and the footage from my camera. These people were poisoning my mother, and I was going to make them pay. The water testing lab looked surprisingly unimpressive from the outside, just another nondescript storefront in a strip mall. But the technician, Dave, took my sample and my story very seriously. "It'll take 48 hours for complete results," he warned, "but I can run a quick screen for common contaminants today." While waiting, I visited Mum in the hospital. Her skin was almost grey against the stark white sheets, dark circles hanging beneath her eyes like bruises. The sight of her so frail and weak fueled my determination. "The neighbors keep asking about you," I told her, trying to sound upbeat. "Elaine brought soup. Even Mr. Jenkins from 2 doors down sent flowers." Mum tried to smile, but it was weak and strained. "And Karen? Has she sent another violation notice while I've been away?" I squeezed her hand, my jaw tight. "Don't worry about Karen right now." My phone vibrated with a text from Dave. "Call me ASAP." I stepped into the hallway, my heart pounding in my chest. "What did you find?" I asked, my voice barely a whisper. "Ethylene glycol," Dave said grimly. "Antifreeze, low concentration, but definitely present. I've never seen it in residential water before. You should call the police immediately." I drove straight to the police station, armed with my water sample and the damning video footage. Officer Martinez took my report, but her expression remained skeptical. "The video shows someone at your water meter, but we can't clearly see what substance is being poured," she explained, "and trace amounts of chemicals can get into water systems in many ways." "My mother is in the hospital with organ damage," I protested, my voice rising in desperation. "The timing matches perfectly with when the Thompsons were at our meter." "We'll investigate," she promised, but her tone lacked conviction. I left feeling utterly defeated and frustrated. Back home, another HOA notice awaited, this one even more infuriating than the last. "Unauthorized security equipment must be removed within 24 hours. They knew about my camera, which meant they'd been watching our house. A chilling realization. The next day, I installed 3 more cameras, hidden ones this time. If the Thompsons returned, I'd catch them from multiple angles, leaving no room for doubt. At the hospital, Dr. Patel confirmed the findings from my water test. "Ethylene glycol poisoning matches your mother's symptoms. We've adjusted her treatment accordingly, but the damage to her kidneys may be permanent." Permanent. The word echoed in my head like a death knell as I drove home, my hands gripping the steering wheel so tightly My knuckles turned bone white. A voicemail waited on my phone from Malcolm Reed, the HOA treasurer. Michael, we need to discuss these allegations you're making. The board takes homeowner disputes very seriously, but accusing fellow residents of criminal activity without proof has consequences. I deleted the message, my blood simmering. Then I called my college roommate, Jamie, who was now an environmental lawyer. They're poisoning her, Jamie, slowly I explained, my voice choked with emotion. Just enough to make her sick, not enough to kill her quickly. They want us gone because Mum opposed their fee increases. This is serious, Michael, Jamie said, her voice grave. If the police won't help, we need to get creative. Tell me everything about Pinecrest Gardens infrastructure. For the next 3 hours, we meticulously dug into property records, utility agreements, and the HOA charter. Jamie was a relentless researcher. Then she found something truly interesting. Unlike most neighborhoods, where water was provided by the city, Pinecrest Gardens water came from private wells, managed by a company called Clearwater LLC. Look at this, Jamie said, sending me a link. Clearwater filed for Chapter 11 bankruptcy last month. They're restructuring debt and likely selling assets. Why does that matter? I asked, my mind starting to race. Because whoever owns the water rights controls the water, Jamie explained. The HOA has a long-term contract with Clearwater, but if someone else bought the company, a daring, audacious plan began forming in my mind. How much would it cost to buy a failing water company? More than most people have lying around, Jamie admitted, but less than you might think in bankruptcy proceedings. I thought about Mum's deteriorating health, the mounting hospital bills, the smug, self-satisfied look on Karen's face. I've got savings and my 401k, and the house has equity. Michael, think very carefully, Jamie warned. This is a huge move. It could be incredibly risky. But in my heart, I was not afraid and decided to be bold. The next morning, as I was leaving to visit Mom, Karen's SUV blocked my driveway. She rolled down her window, smiling that infuriating fake smile like we were old friends. Michael, the board is concerned about your mother. If her health makes maintaining property standards difficult, perhaps it's time to consider assisted living. I know a lovely facility in the next county, sir. My hands clenched into fists so tight I felt my nails digging into my palms. My mother isn't going anywhere. Well, Karen said, her voice hardening, the neighborhood has certain expectations. We've been patient, but the violations are piling up. The fines now total over $3,000. $3,000, I echoed, incredulous. I never received notices for most of these supposed violations. Karen waved a dismissively manicured hand. They were properly delivered, according to HOA protocol. If you can't pay, we'll have to place a lien on your property. That's when I knew, with absolute certainty, that this wasn't random harassment. They were systematically trying to force us out, to steal our home. I'll handle the fines, I said, my voice surprisingly calm. And Karen, I'd be careful about drinking the water around here. I hear it's not safe. Her smile faltered, just for a fraction of a second, before she sped away. At the hospital, Mum had visitors, Elaine and 3 other neighbors, all of whom had also butted heads with Karen in the past. We don't believe the HOA's stories about you and your mum, Elaine said firmly. Karen's been getting worse since she became president, more power-hungry. Has anyone else gotten sick? I asked carefully, trying to keep my voice steady. They exchanged uneasy glances. Not sick exactly, said Mr. Jenkins, but my dog died suddenly last month after Karen complained about his barking. The vet couldn't explain it. I showed them the water test results, but not the video. I didn't want to put them at risk. We're with you, Elaine promised. Just tell us how we can help. That evening, I called Jamie's contact at a bankruptcy law firm. After explaining in detail what I wanted to do, I emptied my savings account and applied for a home equity loan. The risk was enormous, but the thought of Mum suffering, of Karen getting away with her cruelty, spurred me on. The next day, Dr. Patel pulled me aside during my visit with Mum, his expression grave. Her kidneys are functioning at 40% capacity. She's going to need dialysis, possibly a transplant eventually. The weight of his words felt like a physical blow. I sat in the hospital parking lot staring at nothing, a cold, hard rage building inside me. My phone rang. It was Jamie. "The initial offer has been submitted," she said, her voice cautiously optimistic. "Now we wait." 2 days later, Malcolm Reed left another voicemail, his tone increasingly agitated. "Michael, we've heard disturbing rumors about your intentions regarding Clearwater LLC. The board would like to meet with you immediately to discuss water access concerns." They were worried. Good. I deleted the message and checked my hidden cameras. No sign of the Thompsons near our water meter, but Doug's car had driven by our house 6 times yesterday. He was definitely keeping tabs on us. Then, a breakthrough. Jamie's contact called with news. Our offer for Clearwater LLC had been accepted. In 1 week, I would own the company that controlled the HOA's entire water supply. That night, as I sat by Mum's hospital bed, watching her sleep, her frail body connected to a multitude of machines, I made a silent promise. Karen Thompson thought she could poison my mother and get away with it. She was about to learn just how wrong she was. My blood pumped furiously in my ears. My determination hardened into something unbreakable. The lab results were in my hands, and I could barely read them through the red haze of my anger. The water sample from our house contained ethylene glycol, antifreeze, not enough to kill Mum quickly, but just enough to make her slowly, agonizingly sicker each day. I slammed my fist on the table, rattling my coffee cup. Who does this to an innocent woman? To anyone? I called Detective Rivera immediately. "I have proof. The lab found antifreeze in our water, and I have video of Doug Thompson tampering with our water line." The detective sighed, her voice weary. "I understand you're upset, Mr. Davis, but the video doesn't clearly show what substance he's adding, if anything. And finding chemicals in your water doesn't prove who put them there." "Are you serious?" I exploded, my voice cracking with disbelief and rage. "They're poisoning my mother." "We need direct evidence linking the Thompsons to the chemical," she repeated, her tone frustratingly measured. "Keep the video safe, and we'll continue investigating." That afternoon, a bright red notice appeared on our door, the bold letters practically screaming, "Violation, unauthorized surveillance equipment. Must be removed within 48 hours or face a $500 fine." I laughed bitterly. Of course, Karen would try to get rid of the very cameras that caught her husband in the act. I took photos of the notice and called Mum's doctor to update him on the lab results. "We can adjust her treatment now that we know what we're dealing with," he said, his voice somber. "But Michael, she needs to stop being exposed immediately." "I'm trying everything," I whispered, watching Mum sleep in her hospital bed, tubes running from her arms, her face gaunt and pale. That night, I couldn't sleep. I paced our living room until 3 a.m., relentlessly searching online for anything about HOA water systems. A forgotten memory surfaced. Dad once mentioned something about our neighborhood's unusual water setup. I dug through his old files in the basement until sunrise, sneezing from the dust, my eyes burning with exhaustion. And then I found it. In a folder labeled Home Purchase, documents showed that Pinecrest Gardens water didn't come directly from the city, but through a private company called Clearwater LLC. Curious, I researched Clearwater LLC all day, neglecting my work responsibilities entirely. Their website looked ancient, last updated in 2018. Public records showed they owned water rights to 3 neighborhoods, including ours. More importantly, a recent Business Journal article mentioned they were facing bankruptcy after their founder died. My college roommate, Jason, now worked as a water rights attorney in Colorado. I hadn't spoken to him in years, but I dialed his number anyway, my heart pounding with a mixture of hope and trepidation. "Jason, it's Michael Davis. I have a weird legal question." After explaining everything, Jason went quiet for so long, I thought we'd been disconnected. "So you're saying this company that controls your HOA's water is going bankrupt?" he finally asked. "That's what it looks like," I confirmed. "And you want to know if you could buy it?" My heart raced at hearing my half-formed, desperate idea spoken aloud. "Could I?" I pressed. "Theoretically, yes," Jason said slowly. "Water rights are property. They can be bought and sold." "But Michael, what exactly are you planning?" I glanced at Mum's empty chair, where she should be, doing her crossword puzzles, her laughter echoing in my memory. "Justice," I replied, my voice low and steady. "This could cost everything you have, Michael," Jason warned. "What's money compared to Mum's life?" I replied, my mind already racing with the dizzying, terrifying possibilities. That evening, I visited Mom in the hospital. Her skin looked alarmingly yellow under the harsh, fluorescent lights. "Any news on what's making me sick?" she asked weakly. I squeezed her hand, debating how much to tell her. Before I could answer, Karen Thompson walked in, carrying a ridiculously large bouquet of lilies. "Oh, I didn't know you'd be here," she said, with a display of fake surprise that made my stomach churn. "I've been so worried about your mother." Our eyes locked. Did she know that I knew? Was this visit a way to see how much damage she'd done? To gloat in her cruelty? "How thoughtful of you," I said coldly. "Mum needs rest now. You should go." Karen placed the flowers down with exaggerated care and touched Mom's foot through the blanket. "We're all praying for you, Margaret. The neighborhood just isn't the same without your smile." After she left, Mum looked confused. That was strange. She's never brought me flowers before. I gripped the bed rail so hard, my knuckles turned white. "Mum, I need to ask you something important. Do you trust me?" "With my life," she answered without hesitation. "I might need to do something drastic to make you safe. It might make some people angry." She smiled weakly. "Your father always said, sometimes you need to fight fire with fire." Her eyes drifted shut, the medication pulling her back under. As I left the hospital, my phone buzzed with an email from Jason. It contained contact information for Clearwater LLC's bankruptcy attorney. The subject line read, "Are you sure about this?" I wasn't sure about anything, except that Karen and her cronies deserved whatever was coming to them. I wondered, with a growing sense of unease, just how far they would go to protect their carefully constructed, picture-perfect neighborhood image. "You want to buy Clearwater LLC?" The bankruptcy attorney stared at me as if I'd grown a second head. "The company that owns 3 failing water systems, including the troubled, contentious water of Pinecrest Gardens?" I nodded firmly, my heart racing, but my voice steady. "That's exactly what I want." "But why? The infrastructure needs significant upgrades. They're behind on their permits and—" "I have my reasons," I interrupted, cutting him off. "How much?" He named a price that made my mouth go dry. It would take every penny of my savings, my 401k with the hefty early withdrawal penalty, and I'd still need a substantial loan. But Mum's pale, drawn face flashed in my mind, and I knew I had no choice. "I'll need 2 weeks to get the money together," I said, already mentally calculating how to make it happen. Walking to my car, doubts flooded me. Was I completely insane? Could I really pull this off? My phone buzzed with a text from the hospital. Mum's kidney function was getting worse. The doubts vanished, replaced by a renewed surge of cold, hard determination. The next morning, I applied for a home equity loan and initiated the withdrawal of my retirement funds. The bank manager raised his eyebrows, but thankfully asked no questions. I called work and requested unpaid leave for a family emergency, a vast understatement. While waiting for the loan approval, I visited the county records office and pulled every document related to Clearwater LLC. The clerk, a kind, grey-haired woman named Doris, helped me navigate the labyrinthine filing system. "Interesting company," she commented, her voice laced with a hint of local history. "They've held those water rights since 1983. Used to be well run, until old Mr. Jenkins died. Do you know if they have any special powers over the neighborhoods they serve?" I asked, trying to sound casual. Doris smiled knowingly. "Honey, the one who controls the water controls everything. That's been true since the beginning of time." Her words sent a shiver down my spine. The loan was approved faster than expected. I signed a mountain of paperwork, trying not to think about the massive debt I was taking on, the sheer audacity of my plan. Jason called to check on my mental state. "You're really doing this?" he asked, his voice a mixture of disbelief and concern. "You understand you'll be responsible for providing water to hundreds of homes?" "I only care about one home right now," I replied, my voice tight. "But don't worry, I'm not planning to leave anyone without water permanently, just strategically." "That doesn't sound reassuring," Jason muttered. 3 weeks of sleepless nights and endless paperwork later, I sat in a sterile conference room, signing the final documents. The bankruptcy attorney still looked thoroughly confused, but clearly pleased to finally close the troubled account. "Congratulations," he said, sliding a thick folder toward me. "You now own Clearwater LLC, including all assets, permits, and obligations. The staff password sheet for the digital systems is inside." Driving home, with the folder beside me, felt utterly surreal. I now controlled the water supply to the very people who had poisoned my mother. The sheer power of it made me dizzy. I stopped by the hospital first. Mum was sleeping, her face thin and drawn, her breathing shallow and labored. Dr. Patel met me in the hallway, his expression grim. "We've removed the toxins from her system, but there's been significant damage to her kidneys and liver. She might recover partially with time, but some effects could be permanent." Rage, hot and consuming, boiled inside me. Permanent. She was perfectly healthy before this. "I'm sorry," he said quietly. "The good news is she's stable enough to come home next week. You'll need to monitor her very closely, though." A nurse approached with fresh sheets. "Such a sweet lady," she commented. "And that neighbor of yours comes by every day with flowers. Karen, is it? Says your mum is like family to her." Bile rose in my throat. Karen was coming here daily, playing the concerned neighbor, while her husband's poison did its insidious work. I thanked the nurse and sat with Mum until visiting hours ended. On my way out, I passed the gift shop and spotted Karen selecting another overly cheerful bouquet. I ducked behind a display, watching as she purchased lilies and asked the clerk for a card. Through the gift shop window, I could see her writing on the tiny card, her mouth curved in what might look like concern to others, but I recognized the smug satisfaction underneath. At home, I opened the Clearwater LLC folder and found the login information for their billing and water management system. The outdated software took forever to load, but eventually I had access to every water meter in Pinecrest Gardens, including flow rates, billing history, and, most importantly, remote shut-off controls. My phone rang just after midnight. It was a number I didn't recognize. "Hello, Michael. This is Malcolm Reed from the HOA board." His voice sounded tense, almost panicked. "We've become aware that you've purchased Clearwater LLC." My heart skipped a beat. How did they find out so quickly? "News travels fast," I said calmly, trying to keep my voice steady. "The board would like to meet with you tomorrow to discuss this unusual situation." "I'm not interested in meeting," I replied, my grip tightening on the phone. "Be reasonable, Michael," Malcolm's voice hardened. "We all live here. This affects everyone in Pinecrest Gardens." "So does my mother," I said, my anger rising, threatening to spill over. "And she might not live here much longer thanks to your friends." "I don't know what you're implying, but tell Karen and the board they'll receive official notice tomorrow," I interrupted, cutting him off. I hung up before he could respond. I stayed up all night, meticulously learning the water system controls. By dawn, I had drafted an official notice to the HOA board. Effective immediately, water rates will increase by 400% for all Pinecrest Gardens residents. As the sun rose, I walked to our community mailbox and sent identical letters to each board member. Then, I drove to the small, dusty Clearwater LLC office, which I now owned, and changed the locks. Inside, dusty filing cabinets contained decades of records. In a file labeled Pinecrest Gardens, I found something particularly interesting, a contract clause allowing for emergency rate adjustments without prior approval due to extenuating circumstances. A slow smile spread across my face. My phone began ringing non-stop. First Malcolm again, then other board members, their voices ranging from pleading to outraged. I let them all go to voicemail. Only when Karen's name flashed on my screen did I answer. "What do you think you're doing?" she hissed, her voice dripping with venom. "Managing my business," I replied calmly, enjoying her fury. "This is illegal. You can't quadruple our water rates overnight." "Actually, I can," I said, my voice dangerously soft. "Section 7, paragraph 3 of the original contract. You might want to read it." There was a stunned silence on the other end. Then her voice, tight with barely controlled rage. "What do you want?" I smiled, a genuine smile, for the first time in weeks. "Let's talk about what you've been putting in my mother's water." Karen banged on my door at 7 a.m. the next morning, her face red with fury, her perfectly coiffed hair slightly disheveled. "You can't do this. It's extortion," she screamed, waving the outrageously inflated water bill in my face. I leaned against the door frame, surprisingly calm. "Is it? Kind of like slowly poisoning an elderly woman, isn't it?" "You have no proof," she hissed, glancing nervously at my security camera, her eyes narrowed. "I don't need proof anymore," I said, my voice low and steady. "I have something better. I have control." The phone calls continued relentlessly throughout the day. Malcolm, the treasurer, called 6 times, his voice increasingly desperate. Board members I'd never even spoken to suddenly wanted to chat. I let most go to voicemail, but finally picked up when Malcolm called from a different number. "This is unacceptable," he sputtered. "People can't afford these rates." "I have terms," I said simply. First, a public admission of what Karen and Doug did to my mom. Second, they leave Pinecrest Gardens forever. Third, you create a fund for Mum's medical bills. They're over $200,000 now. That's outrageous. We can't admit to something with no proof. Then I guess I'll shut off water service to the entire neighborhood, except for my house, tomorrow, I said, calmly. I checked with 3 lawyers. It's completely legal. I hung up, my heart pounding, but my resolve unwavering. 20 minutes later, Karen texted everyone in the HOA directory about an emergency meeting that night at the community center. The message called me a neighborhood terrorist who was holding our water hostage. I had no intention of going, but my neighbor, Ted, knocked on my door at 6:30 p.m. "You should come," he said quietly. "Karen's telling everyone you're making up stories about her poisoning your mum because you're angry about gnome violations." The community center was buzzing with angry, confused voices when I walked in. The room went silent the instant I entered. Karen stood at the front, pointer in hand, displaying a slide that read, "Water Terrorist," with my picture underneath. "Here he is now," she announced dramatically, her voice dripping with sarcasm. "The man who thinks he can bankrupt us all over some silly garden decoration rules." I walked straight to the front. "May I?" I asked, holding out my hand for the microphone. Karen clutched it tighter, but Malcolm, looking increasingly nervous, nodded at her to hand it over. "I bought Clearwater LLC for one reason," I said, my voice shaking slightly but filled with a righteous anger that resonated through the room. "My mother has been in the hospital for weeks. 3 separate labs found antifreeze in our water line. I have video of Doug Thompson tampering with our water supply while Karen kept watch." Murmurs rippled through the crowd, a wave of shock and disbelief. Karen lunged for the microphone. "Lies, all lies. He has no proof. He's just angry because we enforce the rules everyone else follows. Why would I spend my life savings to buy a water company over garden gnomes?" I asked the crowd, my voice rising in volume. "Think about it." Doug stood up, his face flushed. "This is defamation. We'll sue you." An older woman in the back raised her hand, her voice trembling. "My dog got sick last month." The older woman continued, her voice gaining strength. "After Karen complained about my holiday decorations, the vet found something strange in his blood, but couldn't identify it." Other neighbors began to stand, their voices joining the growing chorus of suspicion and outrage. "My kids had stomach problems for weeks after we argued about fence height," one woman said. "We changed to bottled water, and they got better." Another chimed in, "I've been feeling unusually tired and dizzy lately, and I couldn't figure out why." Karen's face went pale, her carefully constructed facade of control crumbling before my eyes. "This is ridiculous. You're all being manipulated," she shrieked, her voice desperate. As the meeting dissolved into utter chaos, with people shouting questions and accusations, I slipped out, feeling a strange mix of exhaustion and vindication. When I got home, I found my mailbox smashed and the word "liar" spray-painted in large, angry letters across my garage door. The next morning, my phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. "Check your email." In my inbox was a message with no text, just a video attachment. It showed Karen and Doug arguing in their garage, their voices clearly audible. "They can't prove anything," Doug was saying, pouring liquid from a container clearly labeled antifreeze into a smaller bottle. "Just a few drops in the right places and problem neighbors solve themselves." I immediately forwarded the email to everyone in the HOA directory, to the police, and to several local news outlets. By noon, police cars lined our street, their lights flashing as they led Karen and Doug away in handcuffs. I stood watching from my window, a strange sense of detachment washing over me. I wondered who had sent me the video and why they'd waited until now to share it. Had it been another neighbor, too afraid to speak up before? My phone rang. It was the hospital. Mom's kidneys were failing. I rushed to the hospital, weaving through traffic, my heart pounding in my chest, running red lights in my desperation. Mum lay hooked to machines, her breathing shallow and ragged. "We need to start dialysis immediately," Dr. Patel explained, his voice grave. "The damage to her kidneys is severe." My phone wouldn't stop buzzing. News vans parked at the neighborhood entrance. The police called twice, asking for copies of my water test results and security footage. We found 6 bottles of antifreeze in the Thompsons' garage. Detective Rodriguez told me later that day. One had a modified cap with a small tube attachment. "Lab tests show it matches the chemical signature in your water samples." When I finally returned home that night, exhausted and emotionally drained, I found 30 neighbors standing on my lawn, holding candles, their faces filled with a mixture of relief and shame. Ted stepped forward, handing me an envelope. "We took up a collection for your mom's medical bills," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "It's not enough, but it's a start." Inside was $14,750 in checks and cash. "We didn't know," whispered Mrs. Gonzalez, who lived 3 doors down, tears streaming down her face. "Karen told everyone your mum was making up her illness for attention." The story exploded across the local news. HOA horror. Couple poison neighbor's water over garden gnomes, ran the headline. 3 more families came forward with suspicious illnesses following disputes with Karen. Malcolm called me from a new number, his voice shaking so badly I could barely understand him. "I swear, I didn't know what they were doing. Please, you have to believe me." "Did you help cover it up?" I asked, my voice cold and hard. His silence was all the answer I needed. The preliminary hearing was standing room only. Karen and Doug pleaded not guilty, their lawyer arguing the video was doctored and calling me a vengeful homeowner with a vendetta. Their bail was set at $500,000 each. Malcolm and 2 other board members resigned after text messages surfaced, showing they had discussed my mother's suspicious illness months ago and had actively dismissed concerns from other residents. The HOA office was flooded with angry calls demanding all board members step down. I received a letter from the district attorney asking if I'd accept a plea deal where Karen and Doug would serve 5 years instead of the possible 20. "No," I replied without hesitation. "They tried to kill my mother, slowly and painfully. They deserve the maximum." Ted and 5 other neighbors formed a new interim HOA board. Their first act was to suspend all fines and violations, pending a complete review of the bylaws. The water company became a hot topic. Lawyers for the HOA argued I'd purchased it illegally, but my paperwork was solid. I announced new rates, normal rates for most residents, but a special premium for properties owned by anyone who had served on Karen's board. "This is simply a business decision," I explained to reporters, my voice devoid of emotion. "I calculate risk differently for those who supported poisoners." 4 former board members put their houses up for sale the next day. No one bought them. Meanwhile, Mum began to improve. The dialysis worked, though doctors warned she might still need a kidney transplant eventually. I spent days researching treatments, nights sleeping in her hospital room in an uncomfortable chair. On day 17, I woke to find her watching me, her eyes surprisingly clear. "You look terrible," she whispered, smiling weakly. "You should see the other guys," I joked, tears spilling down my cheeks, a mixture of relief and exhaustion. The following week, police discovered a journal in Karen's bedside table, detailing every troublemaker she'd targeted over 3 years, 15 families, 3 pets that had died mysteriously, 1 elderly man who had moved to assisted living after unexplained health problems. The prosecutor added 14 more counts to the charges. Mum came home 63 days after her collapse. The neighbors lined the street, clapping and cheering as our car pulled up. Ted and his wife had cleaned our house, filled the fridge, and put the garden gnomes back in place, now joined by 20 new ones contributed by neighbors. "We thought you might want to rebuild your collection," Ted explained, his eyes twinkling. The following Sunday, the new HOA board president, Elaine Rodriguez, who, it turned out, had despised Karen for years, knocked on our door with an official document. The board voted unanimously to exempt your property from all HOA regulations permanently, she said, handing me the notarized papers. "And we'd like to name the community garden after your mom, if that's okay." Mum cried when I told her, tears of joy and relief. 2 months later, Karen and Doug accepted a plea deal for 12 years each, plus restitution. During the impact statements, Mum spoke directly to them, her voice surprisingly strong. "I forgive you," she said simply, "but I'll never forget." I transferred ownership of Clearwater LLC to a community trust run by Ted, Elaine, and 3 other neighbors. The proceeds now fund medical expenses for all of Karen's victims. Yesterday, we held the ribbon-cutting ceremony for the Helen Morrison Healing Garden at the community center. Every family brought a garden gnome to place along the pathway. I still keep the security cameras running, though. Some lessons you only need to learn once. This story highlights the importance of vigilance, community, and standing up for what's right, even when it's difficult. It shows how seemingly minor disputes can escalate, and how crucial it is to trust your instincts when something feels wrong. It also underscores the power of collective action and the resilience of the human spirit. What are your thoughts on this story? Have you ever experienced a similar situation with an HOA or a neighbor? Share your experiences and thoughts in the comments below. And don't forget to subscribe to the channel for more compelling stories and discussions.